It's the German Grand Prix, only on ITV. Race 11 in the championship, an enormous crowd at Hockenheim, where it's just started to rain. You're going to enjoy the next hour and a half, believe me, with Martin Brundle and Murray Walker.
You know, it's a funny thing. All Grand Prix are tension-loaded before they begin. But there's something about this one in particular. I don't just mean Hockenheim, I mean this particular one. I can feel the most enormous tension. The conventional wisdom is that the McLaren-Mercedes cars are going to walk away with this race. They're on the front row of the grid. Mika Häkkinen up there for the 7th time this year in pole position. David Coulthard alongside him. Häkkinen leading the World Championship. And Michael Schumacher is down there in 9th place. But look at the other things that are causing this sort of butterfly feeling I've honestly got in my stomach. Jacques Villeneuve, who's had a terrible 1998, the reigning world champion, is there in 3rd place on the grid, very little slower during qualifying than Mika Häkkinen. Ralf Schumacher, the highest that he has ever been in the Jordan and ahead of his brother. Damon Hill just behind him. Eddie Irvine 6th on the grid behind him. And you still go on through Alexander Wurz and Giancarlo Fisichella to Michael Schumacher. So the start, remember what it was like in Austria last weekend for very different reasons. The rain had caused the grid to be a very peculiar shape. Well, it's the same today for totally different reasons. So you need to watch Michael Schumacher, who's going to be on the right-hand side of the grid, 5 rows back when you're looking down the start line. And you need also to watch Eddie Irvine, although the Ferraris are not going well here. And this is not a circuit, actually, where the driver can make all that much difference. There's 4 long straights where they go over 200 miles an hour, and the chicanes. What you need is grip and grunt. I'm not saying a good driver can't make up some difference, but not as much as he does maybe at other circuits.
Well, you certainly do need those very high top speeds and an ability to get through the last part of the stadium we're often talking about, and never more so than in the race, because if your car's sliding around, your tyres wear much more quickly, especially the rears as you're trying to get the power down if you've got a lot of wheel spin. So a good setup here does make a big difference, and you're right, Murray, really the driver depends very, very heavily on the chassis engineers and the engine engineers around here, because they're flat out 16,500, 17,000 RPM, depending on which engine exactly, many, many times in 6th gear, and for long periods of time, and it really is an engine killer. Going back to the grid, just walked off the grid, and there's actually quite good humour down there, and I think that's probably the way that people get rid of the tension and the frustration, because there's a lot of joviality going on. A lot of people were expecting, the forecast was between 20 past and 22, say 20 minutes ago, that there would be a heavy rain shower, and it hasn't happened, and I think there's a certain amount of light relief. But as you rightly say, Murray, it's spitting. When I went out in the 2-seat, it was a little bit damp down at the Ost curve, right down the far end of the circuit. The track was glistening, was shining, and you think, how hard can you go in here? And the drivers are going to have to tiptoe a little bit on that first lap, otherwise we'll see them running into each other.
Well, please at home join us in hoping that there isn't rain at Hockenheim. It was one thing at Austria, it's one thing at Spa, where we often get it, but it's a very different thing at Hockenheim, because the 2 long legs of the circuit, which is 4.2 miles long, go slashing through pine forests, as you're going to see in a moment. And when it's raining, those pine forests hold the air. There's no breeze that can get through them. So the rain just hangs in a great curtain. And it's very, very bad news indeed for visibility and for grip.
You can see on the driver's visors there, they've got 2 or 3 layers of plastic, and it looks almost as if you couldn't see out of them, doesn't it? But really, when the visor is down, as you saw Villeneuve just do, you can see quite well. But usually they'll get rid of one of those at the end of the first lap when you get the most dirt, especially when they fill these engines up just before the start of a race. Often that's when they're putting out a little bit of oil and some dirt as they're moving on and off line, and then they'll use the rest of them through the race.
So off they go on the grooved tyres, of course. They go round the north curve first of all, which they'll take in race conditions at about 90 miles an hour. Now they're coming towards us, towards the Jim Clark chicane, the first of 3 major chicanes. And believe it or not, in qualifying yesterday, they were doing over 220 miles an hour. These cars are faster in a straight line than last year's cars. Here's the first of the 3 chicanes, the Jim Clark.
They're faster because under the new 98 regulations, they're about 10% narrower. Therefore, the frontal area of the car is less, and they're much, much quicker through the air. Plus, they probably have 20 or 30 horsepower more than last year, just through natural development. Those spots of rain you can see on the helicopter camera there, let me tell you, when you're doing 220 miles an hour, that seems like quite a lot of drizzle. The rain is streaming off of those rip-offs on your visor, and you always get the impression it's raining harder than it really is.
So there is Villeneuve, there is Schumacher and Damon Hill as they come down to the Senna curve, as it's called. Left, right, left. They've completed 3 of the semi-straights, the over 200-mile-an-hour straights. Now they're going down the 4th one towards the entrance to the Motordrome, which is surrounded with concrete grandstand holding 100,000 plus chanting, shouting, rocket firing, scarlet wearing, Michael Schumacher supporting Germans. And boy, do they love Schumacher. But look where he is as he's weaving down. There's Häkkinen coming towards us, Coulthard, Villeneuve 3rd position, and into the Motordrome.
I remember when Schumacher was 16th on the grid at Spa a few years ago and came through to win the race. He has the ability, he has the confidence, but I'm not sure he has the car in dry conditions to be fast enough. We'll keep an eye on him.
Yeah, and I'm not sure he's got the car in wet conditions because they're running minimum downforce, which means that the grip is reduced. They haven't got nearly enough grip, and Michael was quite downcast yesterday because even Eddie Irvine, who's starting ahead of Michael Schumacher, is only 6th on the grid. We're riding with Jacques Villeneuve, and in front of us is Mika Häkkinen, or is it David Coulthard? Coulthard will peel across to the right, and there he goes.
Yes, Coulthard craftily there, dropping the clutch and spinning the rear wheels. You're not allowed to be seen to be making a practice start, but they can't really stop you from just rolling slowly along and nailing the throttle pedal and having the same effect.
21 cars and drivers starting. Ricardo Rosset not amongst them. He had a nasty crash yesterday, banged his head. He's all right, but he's not starting.
Look at Coulthard. He's set his car up already pointing towards Häkkinen's side of the track because it's very, very dirty on the inside there. It never gets used apart from the starts.
2 lights on, 3, 4, 5, out. Now, and it's go in Germany. Look at Schumacher. Shoots out and down to the right-hand side. Häkkinen leads and Coulthard is in 2nd place. Schumacher 3rd and Damon Hill is in 4th position. Where is Jacques Villeneuve? He's had a bad start. Jacques Villeneuve coming towards us. The Jordans have both made a place. McLaren, Jordan, and up there is Eddie Irvine.
And watch Villeneuve now. I think he's going to pop out from behind Damon Hill. No, he's going to go right. Damon Hill's covered the inside line. Villeneuve braking much later, taking back the 4th position. He had a terrible start, a copybook start for the 2 McLarens.
And Michael Schumacher's starting to make progress. Remember that Giancarlo Fisichella is in a car that doesn't really fit him. You won't see the red spot on the nose because he's changed the spare.
There goes Schumacher down the outside. We're not on board yet. Schumacher goes down the outside. Yes, he's already past the Benetton and up behind Eddie Irvine. A great first lap for Michael Schumacher so far.
And there's 44 laps to go after this one as streaming down towards the Motordrome for the first time comes Mika Häkkinen in his wheel tracks David Coulthard. Schumacher Ralph is 3rd, Villeneuve is 4th, Hill is 5th, then it's Irvine 6th and Michael Schumacher is in 7th position and they're on their way out of the Senna curve down to the Motordrome. This is it at over 200 miles an hour and already the McLarens are breaking free. There's Irvine, there's Schumacher. He's ahead, of course, of both the Benettons, and into the Motordrome they come for the first time round to the Sachs curve, which is a first gear 60-mile-an-hour corner coming out now of the south curve. And look at the lead already. The Mika Häkkinen in the McLaren-Mercedes has got over his teammate David Coulthard. Then Ralf Schumacher, who doesn't seem to be able to close on them. Villeneuve, Damon Hill, Eddie Irvine, Michael Schumacher, Fisichella, Frenson's come up. He's gained 2 or 3 places because Frenson started down in 10th position. So now it's starting to settle down a bit. We're riding with Jacques Villeneuve. That's Ralf Schumacher in front of us, down to the chicane. Flick right, flick left. Listen to that Mecca Renault engine.
Well, we've seen this sort of pattern recently. Häkkinen seems to be able to attack that first lap stronger than Coulthard, and then over the next 2 or 3 laps, Coulthard begins to eat into that advantage. A very tidy, very well-behaved first lap. Long time since I've seen such good driving on the first lap. Some good overtaking manoeuvres, nobody really making any mistakes, but very, very undramatic.
Remember the way that Eddie Irvine gave way to Michael Schumacher in Austria to enable the German to finish in 3rd position. Well, it's a similar situation here. There is Michael Schumacher, ahead of him is his teammate.
Barrichello making a good move there on what I believe to be Johnny Herbert. So Barrichello passing Herbert for 11th place, a good move into the 3rd chicane, but the leaders are already into the stadium.
Now, Hockenheim is very much an engine breaker. They are on full throttle for about 70% of the lap, and you've got to have a very tough, very strong engine to resist the stresses here. Even David Coulthard's Mercedes gave up on him yesterday. The McLarens and the Ferraris have got a very strong engine, but they're not making any progress at the moment. Eddie Irvine, who is in 6th position, is still behind Damon Hill. There's Damon in the yellow Jordan, Eddie Irvine, Michael Schumacher, Fisichella, Frenson, Lacey, and Barrichello is up in 12th position. So they are spread out. Nobody's making any. Here's a replay of the start.
Schumacher getting away well. Look, Villeneuve realising he's already got away poorly, tries to disrupt the Jordans, didn't work. They just went either side of him, and a pity for Jacques, because I think after the McLarens, he has the fastest car on the racetrack. The rest of them just about got through with no harm done.
And here it is again. There you see.
Oh, there's why. Look, one of the Verts just didn't get away, just didn't seem to react to the light. And look, he's almost last.
Yeah, and Alexander Wurz started 7th. Fisichella, of course, is now ahead of his teammate. Alexander Wurz is running 17th at the moment.
It was Michael Schumacher who made a brilliant move around Wurz to spear across the other side of the track. Luckily, nobody in his way, and Wurz lucky that somebody didn't absolutely cream into the back of him.
So lap 3 in Germany now out of 45, and the McLarens aren't striding off as I expected them to, because Ralf Schumacher is just 2 seconds behind the leader, Mika Häkkinen, and at the moment David Coulthard is the fastest on the track. He's just made the fastest lap, but Ralf Schumacher is piling on the pressure, and he's starting to close on David Coulthard. So up front, McLaren, Mercedes, we're with Villeneuve now in 4th position, chasing the yellow Jordan of Ralf Schumacher as they exit the south curve, come into the bottom straight, the start and finish straight. McLaren, Jordan, Schumacher, Williams, Villeneuve, Jordan, Damon Hill, the 2 Ferraris, Eddie Irvine and Schumacher, and out of the race, the first retirement goes Pedro Diniz in the arrows on lap 4.
Well, we saw Schumacher, Ralf, that is, do a string of 10 very fast laps this morning. Some suggestion he was on a lighter fuel load, but I have to say, he just looked plain quick. And at the moment, he's keeping Coulthard very honest. And in the background, we see, I think it was Irvine locking his front brake very, very badly. But there's the McLarens, and Häkkinen, a slightly stronger lap at the moment. Coulthard just keeping there, but look at Ralf Schumacher. He really is faster, isn't he?
Yeah, now the question to me at the moment is Jacques Villeneuve going to be able to maintain the pressure? Schumacher is ahead of Eddie Irvine. We didn't see it, but Schumacher, Michael, has moved up to 6th position.
I think if they do a replay of that, we'll see that Irvine outbraked himself and Schumi went through, but hopefully we'll see it. But at the moment, here we go again, look, yes, There's Irvine. I thought I saw some smoke in the background, bouncing across the gravel. Schumi's going to come round the inside, and there was no play acting about that one.
Yeah.
He made a mistake.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. I can promise you that that wasn't pre-planned.
There goes the rip-off you just saw from Villeneuve's helmet. You have to be careful you don't deposit that in your own air box, because that soon slows your engine down around it, and it happens more often than you may think.
Do you remember what Eddie Jordan was saying about Ralf Schumacher? He was saying the pressure's really on him now. He's a German in front of his brother at the start, in front of the German crowd. He's one of their heroes too. My goodness, he's rising to it, because he's closing up on David Coulthard. The fastest man on the track at the moment is Häkkinen, who's breaking away slightly with a clear track. But look on lap 5 at how Ralf Schumacher in the yellow Jordan is starting to close a little on David Coulthard. The gap between them is 7/10 of a second. McLaren leads, and we're with Coulthard now going into the chicane. Right, left, Häkkinen is ahead of us, and Ralf Schumacher is behind us. Jacques Villeneuve is 4th. Damon Hill is still 5th. Both the Jordans in the top 5. Michael Schumacher up into 6th position, but he's not making any gain on Damon Hill at the moment.
Yes, and Ralph already 2/10 of a second up on this lap, and clearly flying. The two McLarens identical so far on this lap, so Ralph has the edge.
And I look up into the sky and I see blue sky and white clouds. The dark clouds that were overhead have cleared away at the moment. Hopefully that forecast of rain is not going to be realised. Look at the gap developing between Villeneuve there, who is 4th, and ahead of him Ralf Schumacher. Now you can see why the engines run so fast for so long here. Look at the length of that straight. As they turn into the motordrome, this is turn 11. It's a 15-turn lap, 4.2 miles long. And Mika Häkkinen has got the race by the throat at the present moment. He's faster again. The lap record here is held by Gerhard Berger, the man who won last year for Benetton. 1 minute 45.7. Now that is a 144 mile an hour average. The fastest we've had so far is Mika Häkkinen, 146.4. So that's 7/10 of a second off the lap record, and that's very close indeed. Now, there is Schumacher, there is Irvine. Fisichella is driving a fine race, because with those settings that are for Wurz, although they will have been, and there's a 10-second penalty. 10-second penalty is being given to Olivier Panis for jumping the start. It won't affect the race very much, because he's down in 14th position in the Prost. We're riding with Heinz-Harald Frentzen, 9th place. Ahead of us is Fisichella.
Well, at least this jump start system is still working, because we haven't really seen much of that recently. It was big news when it first came in, and but back in '95, but we haven't seen it come into play. The drivers have been much more disciplined, but clearly Panis a bit over-eager to get away. Here's the first 3.
Yeah, and the Jordan has got a new Evolution Mugen Honda engine. The Mugen firm is run by the great Mr. Honda's son, and it's said by many people that they're using this as a stalking horse to enable them to get themselves right, Honda, for coming back into Grand Prix racing. And at the present moment, Mika Häkkinen isn't extending his lead all that much. He's just 1.6 seconds ahead of Coulthard. He's 2.4 seconds ahead of Ralf Schumacher. They are matching each other, those 3, lap time for lap time, to about 1/10 of a second. And Jacques Villeneuve is a 1/10 of a second slower. So that's the news from Hockenheim. Leave us for a break, but we'll be back soon. Well, here is Olivier Panis in the Ligier, taking that jump start penalty of 10 seconds.
They're not allowed to work on the car during this stop, but the man at the back with the jack is ready just in case he stalls the engine. No point in sitting revving it like that. It overheats the engine more than ever, but Olivier has a nasty habit of wanting to rev the engine during pit stops. You saw Villeneuve jumping across the chicanes there and curbs. He's been doing that all through qualifying, really attacking, but is not doing it much good in the race. He's losing touch with the first 3. More significantly, Michael Schumacher is making no impression at all. Now he's finished his acrobatics of the first lap. His Ferrari is not working round here in the dry.
But Ralf Schumacher's Jordan is working in the dry. Young Ralf is driving out of his skin. 22 years old, and look at him. He's hanging on to those McLarens. Indeed, he's doing more than that. He's closed the gap between himself and David Coulthard in second place. And David Coulthard himself, in the previous laps, has been catching Mika Häkkinen. It may not look very close on the screen, but the gap between the top three now is only of the order of 2 seconds, and as you can see, Ralf Schumacher is pulling away from Jacques Villeneuve. The gap there is nearly 3 seconds as they go round the north curve and head off towards the Jim Clark chicane at 220 miles an hour. And this is really giving the engines some stick. They're on about 16,000 RPM for 70% and more of the lap. Very little in it for the first 3. There is Jacques Villeneuve, who is 4th. Damon Hill, who is in 5th position. Where is Michael Schumacher? There he is, and behind him Eddie Irvine, who's in 7th place. Giancarlo Fisichella, notwithstanding the fact he is in an ill-fitting Benetton, is hanging on in 8th position, giving Eddie Irvine and quite a hard time. There's Fisichella. And in 9th and 10th places, Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Jean Lacey is there. Johnny Herbert is in 12th position. Only one retirement so far on the 9th lap out of 45, and that's Pedro Diniz as coming into the picture. There is Michael Schumacher, 6th in the Ferrari. And he can do nothing at all about Damon Hill. He's lapping 0.2 of a second slower than the Jordan. He's staying ahead of his teammate Eddie Irvine. There's Hill exiting the chicane. But Michael Schumacher is not making up anything on the track. It's going to depend on strategy.
Watch how hard he's driving it. He's all over the curbs as much as he can, and he's really having to work hard at the steering wheel. It's dirty in here, if I remember. That's where Villeneuve plucked all of the turf out. And look at the oversteer it gave Schumacher. He's trying as hard as he can, but the car is just not paying him back. I love these slow-mo replays they always have here at Hockenheim. You see how hard the cars and the drivers' spines are working.
Martin, you've driven mighty quick round here at Hockenheim yesterday and today in the 2-seater Formula One McLaren. They tell me that it's bumpier this year. Is that true?
It's certainly bumpier coming off of the curbs in the 1st and 3rd chicane. It really does give the transmission a hard time, and something the drivers need to be wary of for later in the race. This is a car breaker if there ever was one. But Ralf Schumacher still closing in on Coulthard, who's still closing in on Mika Häkkinen. James has some news for us.
Martin, I'm down in the Ferrari garage, and you know as well as I do that the Ferrari mechanics, all the Italians, they thrive on the emotion of Formula One. I tell you, this race, it's disconsolate down here. They're all hanging around, lying on the floor. They're very depressed. This Ferrari, basically what the problem is, it's not working down the straights very well. It's slow down the straights, so they've had to trim the wings right out. And of course, that means they're losing so much time in the stadium section. I believe that they're on a one-stop strategy, but honestly, the atmosphere down here, it's like a wake.
The problem is, I think everybody's on a one-stop strategy, and I don't think they're going to get any pleasant surprises later on.
Well, if they are, they're going to be stopping round about lap 21 at the earliest, I would estimate, up to about lap 24. And here is Mika Häkkinen, clear track in front of him. Let's go round the Motordrome with him as he turns in from turn 11 up the Stax curve. This is down to first gear, 60 miles an hour. Now accelerates and keeps running left. That is Jarno Trulli, and behind Jarno Trulli is Alexander Wurz in the Benetton. They are 13th and 14th. Here's the midfield then coming towards us. Johnny Herbert there, and behind him you can see Trulli and Wurz.
Remember, Wurz had a very poor getaway. He's been making his way steadily through the field, but clearly not anywhere close enough then for a good slipstream and a dive up the inside into the stadium. And it's very difficult to overtake there. It's difficult enough to do that by yourself, let alone side by side.
I'm impressed that we've just had the one retirement so far. Pedro Diniz, one non-starter, of course, Ricardo Rosset. Because, oh, there was, as I said that, I was about to say the engines are resisting well, but there was a puff of smoke there, and that is Jacques Villeneuve. So it was Coulthard's car, I think, just giving out a puff. Yesterday, Coulthard had to tour off the track. He had an engine problem with the Mercedes, but it's not stopping him from closing on Mika Häkkinen. Look how close he is now.
It was tyre smoke, I think. I think he just locked the inside right tyre just before he turned into the chicane, and of course the smoke travels underneath the car. Wirtz having another go at Trulli. The tyre smoke travels underneath the car and comes out the back and looks like it could have come from the exhaust pipes.
It's a new experience for Alexander Wirtz. He's never driven a race in low downforce trim before, and he was finding it very difficult to master things, but Louise Goodman's got some news for him.
Well, yeah, I'm down at the Jordan garage at the moment. I tell you, it's a total contrast to what's going on at Ferrari. They're loving this. It's a long time since they looked so strong in a race. Both cars currently running in the points. Ralph has been putting in some really impressive times. He's done a couple of fastest laps. He's third at the moment, 6.5 seconds ahead of Damon, who's in fifth. I suspect they're running different fuel loads, though. I think we're going to see Ralph coming in for 2 stops.
Well, hopefully they'll show us a replay of Wirtz putting a very, very good move on Jarno Trulli and just sending one up the inside, making it stick well. He's up into 13th place. Be interesting to watch him through the rest of the race. A long way to go yet. There's Ralph's pit board. Push, look. Ralph's pit board says push. Maybe he's on a different strategy. They need him. I mean, that's a bit of a disheartening thing to read, isn't it?
I can imagine him sitting there and saying, what on earth do you think I'm trying to do now?
I wonder if he knows the translation of that into German. I somehow hope he doesn't, to be honest.
So Mika Häkkinen leads on lap 12. David Coulthard, Ralf Schumacher, for whom I have the greatest admiration in the world, and even more so now, the way he's driving, because the gap between him and Jacques Villeneuve, who is in 4th position, is now over 3 seconds. Damon Hill is about the same behind Villeneuve, and 6 seconds ahead of Michael Schumacher. So Michael has got to hope for engines to go in the front, mechanical problems to hit the cars in front and not his Ferrari. I hope he's not hoping for rain, because no one else will be wanting it, even though he is the rain master.
More turf on the track, but we've got to come clean, Murray. Ralph's been driving like an absolute amateur all year up until the last race, and we said so. But he was brilliant in Austria, and he's clearly driving beautifully today.
Yes, he seems to have settled down extremely well. There is Schumacher, 6th position, only just in the points. And in World Championship terms, this is very bad news for him. Of course, the gap between himself and Mika Häkkinen in the championship is just 8 points at the present moment, but there's another 9 being added if they finished where they are now, because Häkkinen is on a potential 10 points and Michael Schumacher is on a potential single point. But this is lap 12. It's about quarter of the distance through the race. There's still a long, long way to go. Häkkinen leading, Coulthard second, Ralf Schumacher in 3rd place.
Yes, Coulthard lost a half a second there through the stadium, so a little mistake somewhere for David, and that's closed Ralf right up behind him again, look.
Well, Ralf is certainly going to go for it if he gets the opportunity to dive past David Coulthard, who has got a lot more experience, of course. It's David Coulthard's 69th Grand Prix. It's only Ralf Schumacher's 28th Grand Prix. But the young German drove karts for 14 years, and you can't get more competitive than that.
Well, Michael Schumacher, whatever happens today, Michael Schumacher will be disappointed. Look, he's got Irvine just easily keeping behind him. He's running a fairly weak 6th place. You've got Monza coming up later in the year, where it's a similar kind of race setup, and the Ferrari is just off the pace, and he is going to be very, very disappointed about that. But here comes a break.
Lap 14, you see Ralf Schumacher in the yellow Jordan there with Coulthard, but not for very much longer. He's had the signal to come into the pits on the 13th lap, the end of the 13th lap. He will lose, lost 3rd position to Jacques Villeneuve, who goes past as I speak. He's lost 4th position to Damon Hill, who goes past as I speak. While you watch the mechanics, past goes Michael Schumacher and Eddie Irvine. There they are. Behind them, Fisichella. Ralf Schumacher smokes out of the pit, and Jean Alesi is just going through, followed by Rubens Barrichello, who's in 10th position now. Behind Barrichello is Johnny Herbert. So Ralf Schumacher has dropped to about 11th position. There he is in front of Jean Alesi.
Yes, that's not... I don't think that strategy is going to work. We'll have to see how it pans out later on. But Ralf should have been actually faster than that given the strategy he was on, which is why he was keeping so close behind the McLarens, whose rear tyres look as if they're going away. But Ralph looked quicker than them, but in reality it was very false, and he's got to work his way through the traffic now. I'll be amazed if that pays off. Berger won the race last year with a two-stopper. He had a clear performance advantage, and he was very lucky with the way the traffic worked out for him as he came out each time from his two stops. And I don't think it's worked the same way for Ralph. He wasn't fast enough in the first part of the race.
I think you're right. Ralf Schumacher is using the softer compound Goodyear tyre. Both the McLarens are on the harder compound Bridgestone tyre, and that will give them an added advantage. As towards us comes Michael Schumacher, who is now up in comparison when he's moved up a place after his brother has gone in. He was in 6th position. He's now in 5th place. Over the line go the two McLarens. And the question is David Coulthard going to offer any opposition, real opposition, to Michael Schumacher, or have McLaren decided to support him for the rest of the championship?
Good question, Murray. Villeneuve is catching the pair of them quite nicely now. So Villeneuve now, with a bit of clear air in front of him from Ralf Schumacher, is homing in on the two leaders. Häkkinen really, I don't think he's completely satisfied with the way his car's working, and it's just yo-yoing between Coulthard and Häkkinen on the faster laps, but at the moment Villeneuve is the man on the charge. Michael Schumacher picking up his pace nicely.
Yeah, we're watching Damon Hill now in 4th position as the steward of Rubens Barrichello, which came in from 12th position, exits the pit, so he's obviously on a two-stop strategy. He has to stay inside that yellow line until he can join the traffic safely, and he does so behind Jos Verstappen and Mika Salo, who are 14th and 15th now, and ahead of Tora Takagi, the Japanese driver in the Tyrrell, who had a monumental crash yesterday, and his teammate Ricardo Rosset also had a big crash, and the Tyrrell mechanics have been working practically through the night in making 2 cars out of 3.
Yeah, Barrichello in a good chance, even though it's his out lap, he's in with a fine chance there to take the line into the second chicane. Neatly done, didn't panic, didn't lock a brake. Now hopefully Verstappen will move over very quickly for him, and his pit stop traffic-wise didn't work out too badly for him, but he's not threatening to win this race.
2 new teammates, of course. Jos Verstappen, who looks in his mirrors, has replaced Jan Magnussen, the Danish driver, who was dropped by Stewart after having given him as much time as they could possibly dare give him to prove himself as a Formula 1 driver. Well, now Barrichello's going for it.
You can clearly see the difference between new and old tyres on the same car. Barrichello bouncing across the curves with confidence, and Verstappen fighting his car hard. But I'm surprised they haven't radioed to him to just let the guy through. He should be just putting a hand in the end saying, come through, Rubens, you're on fresh tyres, you're going to pass me sooner rather than later. But Verstappen has decided he's going to have a fight. Yeah,
Jos is a tough, determined, very stubborn Dutchman, and he will be wanting to prove his worth to the Stewart team, even possibly to the extent of not moving over, which won't make him very popular indeed. We're on lap 17 now, watching Verstappen, Barrichello, Salo and Takagi as we rejoin the leaders. Mika Häkkinen and David Coulthard. Well, I think I've answered my own question, because David Coulthard is certainly moving up on Mika Häkkinen, and that's Jacques Villeneuve, who is in 3rd position, and he is closer than he was. The gap between him and David Coulthard, who is in 2nd place, is about 3 seconds, so he's taken about half a second out of Coulthard's lead from him, and Damon Hill is still in 4th position, 10 seconds behind the race leader. Michael Schumacher is 5th, Eddie Irvine is 6th, Fisichella is 7th, Heinz-Harald Frentzen is in 8th position, 9th is Ralf Schumacher, the only man who's of the leaders who's made a stop, and Jorna Lacey and Johnny Herbert are 10th and 11th.
And this is Ralf Schumacher currently back in 9th place, as Murray pointed out, as you can see on the screen. So Ralf making his way quite slowly through the traffic as David Coulthard makes a new fastest lap of the race and brings the gap down to Mika Häkkinen to just 1.6 seconds.
1:46.1. Now that is only 0.4 of a second off Gerhard Berger's lap record last year in the wider Benetton with the full slick tyres. They've got groove tyres this year to reduce the grip, and that disparity will have been reduced because although the cars have got these groove tyres which offer less grip, they move down the straights here at Hockenheim quicker than they did last year. As I said earlier on, over 220 miles an hour they were doing yesterday, the lead cars, up to the Jim Clark chicane out of the start and finish straight. This is Heinz Harald Frentzen. David Coulthard's just done another fastest lap to close up further on Mika Häkkinen. Heinz Harald Frentzen's got a clear track in front of him, but if he could see somebody, it would be Fisichella in front of him. And now we join again Ralf Schumacher on the new tyres. Heinz Harald Frentzen in front of him has yet to change tyres, so he will have less grip, and he'll be seeing Schumacher in his mirrors.
Yes, just looking through the times on the speeds on the computers. Barrichello's fastest on 352 kilometers per hour, followed by Coulthard, Wirtz and Fisichella on 351. You can see how close they are at the end of the straight.
Schumacher there, that's Irvine. Behind Irvine is the Benetton of Fisichella in 7th position. Now Frentzen 8th place. Look for the yellow Jordan coming into your picture. It will be Ralf Schumacher in 9th place, and indeed he is closer to his countryman Heinz Harald Frentzen. No change at the front. No change with the Ferraris, and unlikely to be either unless Michael Schumacher strikes a problem. Michael Schumacher's on 2 World Championship points at the present moment. He, of course, has yet to come in. That applies to the 2 cars in front of him. And, of course, Jacques Villeneuve behind him, Damon Hill behind him, but not to Ralf Schumacher.
Well, Coulthard has the gap down to 1.4 seconds, and you can see he's closer, under braking for the Ost curve. Meanwhile, just exiting the first chicane for the 2 Ferraris. That gives you an idea of the kind of lead they have on the racetrack over their championship rivals.
Because of the width of the track and the forest, the cars don't look as fast as they actually are, but it's a mind-numbing speed. And the concentration that's called for is absolutely massive. Gerhard Berger always used to do well here. He won for Ferrari here, and he won last year for Benetton last year, because he was one of the kings of the late braking. He was able to leave his brakes much later than anybody else and judge his speed to perfection, to slow down from over 200 miles an hour to about 60 or 70 miles an hour. So you're watching Damon Hill, but now we're leaving Hockenheim for a short break. Lap 21 out of 45 at Hockenheim, no change at the front, but to my mind, no sign of stay where you are instructions from the McLaren garage, because David Coulthard has closed up a bit. We've got news from James Allen. What is it, James?
Well, it is, Murray, that we're getting into the window now for the one-stoppers. In the next 3 or 4 laps, you'll see them all coming in. They're all starting to slowly get ready. But I think what we're also seeing here is the first time this year the team orders at McLaren. Nothing's been possibly explicitly said, but everybody knows McLaren can run a lot faster than they're running at the moment. They're very much racing with plenty in hand to protect those engines. As you said a moment ago, it's a real engine breaker of a circuit, and they're flattering some of the other cars. They're a lot quicker than this if they were racing against each other.
Well, there is news from the horse's mouth in the nicest possible way, James. And Mika Häkkinen is 1.5 seconds ahead of David Coulthard. As you say, the gap does look pretty static, because Jacques Villeneuve in 3rd position can do nothing about them. It's 6.2 seconds. That's Tora Takagi in the Tyrrell, exiting the pit lane, rejoining the track, accelerating up towards the Jim Clark chicane, as we look now at Johnny Herbert, who's been caught by Alexander Wirtz in the Benetton. Herbert in the Sauber, that's his teammate Lacey in front of him, who is in 10th position, and Alexander Wirtz has edged up on the Sauber. And Johnny's second half of the season has not proved to be a very good one.
Well, we're expecting Hill in for his one and only stop of the Grand Prix, scheduled stop that is. The guys are out in the pit lane full of yellow overalls everywhere. That was the Sauber team you were looking at. Clearly one of those cars is also getting ready to come in, but Herbert's gone past. It must be a Lacey in the lane. Here he is now, 120 kilometers per hour, looking for his blue garage. You really have to keep your wits about you when you're looking for your men in the pit lane. And Damon Hill has gone, he must have gone past, so he'll be in at the end of this current lap. A Lacey, quite a long stop, remember, a lot of fuel to go in to get him to the end of the race. 10.5, about on par.
You can see there goes the Prost of Jarno Trulli, who was in 13th place, followed by Rubens Barrichello. And look at David Coulthard now! He's right up with Mika Häkkinen. Now, you've heard what James has said. I hope I'm not over-exaggerating things, but has Mika made a mistake? Has he got some sort of a problem?
Coulthard took half a second out of him on the mid-section of the racetrack, the longest. It's nearly a minute, that section. Includes 2 chicanes. And that's the one where it's very dirty, and it seems to me Häkkinen is taking it more carefully through there than Coulthard. And if they're not pushing that hard, they're making a jolly good job of covering it up, because their cars are moving around just as much as everybody else's. I don't think their tyres are doing quite the job they expected, or their cars for that matter.
And meantime, Jacques Villeneuve in the background is closing up on Häkkinen. The gap is down to 4 seconds now between Villeneuve. There he is. It's a long time since Jacques Villeneuve won a race, isn't it? And that was Jerez. He was third in Jerez when Häkkinen and Coulthard passed him. So Jacques Villeneuve's a long, long way from his last victory. Was at the Luxembourg Grand Prix in Germany. In comes Fisichella. You're absolutely right. The top men are coming in now. Frentzen is in as well. And the interesting thing is going to be to see where Ralf Schumacher is when the top men have all made their pit stops. Remember, he was third and right behind David Coulthard when he came in first of all for an early pit stop. Häkkinen has yet to stop. Coulthard has yet to stop. Villeneuve has yet to stop. Here is Fisichella being chased by Heinz-Harald Frentzen. They are 8th and 9th positions, and Ralf Schumacher is 7th ahead of both of them. The only man in the top runners to have pit stops.
Well, it's clear that Coulthard's quicker through this midsection he's just coming to the end of, but Mika seems much better through the stadium for whatever reason. I saw David get well out of shape there through that slightly blind chicane, the next corner after this, but for whatever reason Mika can take 4 or 5 tenths out of David through that section as you watch Frentzen coming in to the garage, and the tyre change begins. You've got to hold the steering wheel so that it doesn't move out of the way. You've got to hold your foot on the brake so the rear spindle is in the right position, and that enables the drivers, the mechanics, to do a much better job. Villeneuve in.
Jacques Villeneuve in from 3rd position. Now, where is Damon Hill? Is he going to be coming in, or is he? Yes, he's in. Damon Hill, I can see him entering the pit lane behind Jacques Villeneuve. Jacques Villeneuve's stop then, and Louise Goodman.
Well, that's right. A bit of confusion down here in the Jordan garage. The mechanics are all sitting around on the floor waiting for Damon to stop. He suddenly came on the radio and said, "I'm coming in." They jumped up, rushed out into the pit lane, tyre blankets flying everywhere. He came back on the radio and said, "No, I'm coming in 2 laps' time." So they all had to sit back down again, but he's now been in and done that stop.
That's a Damon Hill wake-up call then, and we just had the news that Eddie Irvine has missed the 3rd chicane. Now, the 3rd chicane is the Senna curve. The question is, did he gain an advantage as a result of it? He won't have done it on purpose, of course, and the rule is that they look at the sector times, and if you haven't had a dramatic improvement, and especially if you haven't made up a place, you are usually allowed to get away with it.
Well, he lost 1.8 seconds to his teammate Michael Schumacher on that lap, so he could probably argue he didn't gain any advantage from it. There's the 2 leaders. Again, nothing much between them, as we saw the Ferrari mechanics ready for one of their cars. It could be either of them. I would expect them to bring Michael Schumacher in first. Yes, you can see how much Irvine's dropped behind Schumacher look. That's because he would have to negotiate the cones in the runoff area to the chicane on the last lap, and it takes a certain amount of time.
Half distance, race order. Häkkinen and Coulthard lead. Villeneuve is third. Hill is fourth. Schumacher is fifth. Eddie Irvine is sixth. We think Michael Schumacher is coming in, and this race could well be decided on the pit stop that Häkkinen and Coulthard have. But now here is Michael Schumacher in the Ferrari from fifth position coming into the pit lane. And James Allen can see him.
Well, I tell you what, if klaxon noise equaled horsepower, Michael Schumacher would be winning this race as he comes in to take on the 75 kilos of fuel he'll need to take him to the end. On the pit wall, Ross Brawn and Jean Todt pretty dejected about Eddie Irvine. They're expecting trouble, I think, from that missed chicane incident. Very nice stop indeed, 10.9, very good for a one-stopper.
I wonder what's going on inside Michael Schumacher's head. He's not used to playing a walk-on part, Murray, and he's playing little more than that today.
Yes, he was pretty dejected yesterday after qualifying. He said, frankly, our car just isn't good enough. The problem is they haven't been able to set it up properly. They haven't been able to get enough mechanical grip. Here's Johnny Herbert being chased by Rubens Barrichello. What's happened? Johnny Herbert goes off through, and Barrichello should take the place there.
I went through there backwards one day in '95 and got a stop-and-go penalty for making an advantage, but I think Johnny may just get penalised for that one.
Look, this is lap 25, and Coulthard is as near as makes very little difference, right up with Mika Häkkinen, as Michael Schumacher down to 7th position following his tyre stop, goes through the chicane. And I say again, I think this race is going to be decided by whether Mika Häkkinen or David Coulthard have the better pit stop, because it's quite conceivable that whoever comes in first could then lose the lead to his teammate when he comes in. It's that close, and we're on lap 26. Less than a second between Häkkinen and Coulthard. Michael Schumacher is up into 3rd position now as a result of the pit stops, bit misleading. Eddie Irvine, his teammate, is 4th. Jacques Villeneuve, who has stopped, is in 5th position. Ralf Schumacher is in 6th place, so Jacques Villeneuve has made up a place on Ralf Schumacher, and here is the first of the 2 Ferraris to stop Eddie Irvine. Now, sorry, the second to stop, and Schumacher's time was 10.9 seconds, so Eddie Irvine's time 12.1. It's lost him 1.2 seconds, and that is Jos Verstappen, who looks as though he's retiring from the German Grand Prix. He certainly is. Off comes the steering wheel. He'll have to put it back again when he gets out of the car. Well done, Jos.
And this is Irvine, I think, recovering, or is that Schumacher recovering from a pit stop? It's Eddie Irvine, yes. He was coming out of the pit lane, and quite clearly Fisichella has managed somehow to pass him. So Fisichella's pit stop has worked out better for him than Eddie Irvine's. Missing that chicane and then a relatively slow pit stop has put Fisichella ahead of Eddie Irvine, and Irvine already trying to come back, but the waving yellow flags prevent any kind of manoeuvre there. That must be where Verstappen's car has stopped.
And it's quite clear that Eddie Irvine is not suffering a penalty as a result of running one. And in comes the McLaren
Häkkinen.
of race leader, Mika Häkkinen. Now, remember what I was saying about pit stops. We're going to make a very careful note of Mika Häkkinen's time here, because David Coulthard might conceivably take the lead when he has to come in. I would expect him to come in at the end of the lap that he is on now. 9.9 seconds. That's an excellent. That's the best leader stop we've had so far, because Mika Häkkinen's been able to stay out that much longer, as a result of which he's had to take on less fuel. And there is Jacques Villeneuve with Ralf Schumacher behind him. Villeneuve running wide as Mika Häkkinen rejoins the race ahead of Villeneuve and Ralf Schumacher. So Coulthard leads, and Mika Häkkinen has dropped down just that place.
Well, unless Ralph's on some weird strategy, we're almost certain he's got to come back in again. So clearly it hasn't paid off. He's ended up with a poor track position behind Villeneuve. Villeneuve doesn't have to stop, and Ralph probably does.
Now, David Coulthard, of course, will know that he's in the lead. He's got a clear track in front of him, and he must really push to try and increase the gap.
Absolutely. Coulthard must be absolutely on the ragged edge on the way in. It's a tricky little pit lane. There's a nasty chicane with high curbs you have to be a bit wary of, and then drill it out of the pit lane and brake very late for the first corner. He might just find himself in front of Mika Häkkinen, but Häkkinen's stop was good, as we've seen.
Yeah, and you're looking at the battle for third position now. Jacques Villeneuve, of course, did not move up to second place because he had had his pit stop, and in comes Mika Häkkinen. Now, remember, in comes David Coulthard. Remember, Häkkinen's stop was 9.9 seconds. James Allen.
Well, Murray, David Coulthard's decision to come in a few laps ago was very much last minute. It's very impressive that, Mika Häkkinen's decision was very much last minute. And Coulthard's overshot. Mechanics have to reset. That will be the difference between him getting out in front or behind Mika Häkkinen. Just looking at the tyres, though, Martin, the wear looks very good. You were thinking maybe they had a problem. They don't have a problem, I think. 9.8, not bad.
Could this be close? 1/10 of a second, notwithstanding the fact. Oh, look, there's Häkkinen. Häkkinen's taking the lead, and that's how close it is. If David Coulthard hadn't overshot and the mechanics hadn't had to move those few feet, he just might have got in front of David Häkkinen, but they did, and he hasn't. And it's first and second again, Häkkinen and Coulthard, but Coulthard now is on marginally newer tyres. It won't make any difference, but they'll be both pushing as hard as they possibly can. Lap 28.
Yeah, it's just picking up on what you're saying, James. I understand what you're talking about on the wear rate, but there's two factors. That's Verstappen trying to find his way back to the pits. He's had a gearbox failure. There he is at the second chicane, and apparently Barrichello may well have the same problem in the sister car. But there's two elements of tyre performance. One is the give up, one is the compound that sort of lets go and doesn't give you the kind of grip you want, and the other is the pure tyre wear. And it really is, it can be a combination of both. But around this circuit, if the compound goes all squirmy on you, then you really struggle through the tighter corners.
Well, this is the funniest keep positions race I've ever seen, because look at the way that Mika Häkkinen and David Coulthard are going for it, and they're coming up to a battle, I think, between Trulli and Wurz in front of them, which is going to delay them, and it's going to depend on who gets past first. Once again, we're in a potential situation where the lead might change.
And looking at the computer, Barrichello is in the pit, so the other Stewart has retired with a gearbox failure. Here's Coulthard, locks the wheel coming in, has to get off the brake pedal and skip straight past the pit lane, and it takes them three-quarters of a second at least to get across and get the refueling rig on. That was a bad mistake from David, and clearly just cost him a little bit of time.
I wouldn't be at all surprised if it cost him even more. I was watching, those petrol hoses are enormously heavy. They're so heavy that it requires two men to control it. The man who operates the nozzle and the man who takes the bulk of the weight behind them. And they had to move 2 pieces ponderously to the right. I wouldn't be surprised if it cost him 1.5, maybe even slightly more seconds, but it's academic now. It cost him. Everybody now has been in for one pit stop, and that's the only one that most of them are going to be having. We're on lap 29. Mika Häkkinen and David Coulthard still battle for the lead. Villeneuve is 6.3 seconds behind them and less than 2 seconds ahead of Ralf Schumacher, so Villeneuve gained a place in his pit stop. Damon Hill is 5th. Both the Jordans are in the top positions.
Well, the McLarens have got to keep pushing. Look, you can see Villeneuve in the background, Ralf Schumacher behind him. I think he'll stop again anytime soon. But look how hard Villeneuve's pushing. The McLarens have got to keep on it.
4th and 5th, because here is Damon Hill and behind him is Michael Schumacher. Now, Schumacher's actually lapping half a second faster than Damon Hill, so he's going to be up with the 1996 world champion soon. As coming towards us, Fisichella in 7th place, Eddie Irvine in 8th position, and Irvine is lapping, as you can see, quicker than Fisichella because he's caught him. But as I've said many, many times before, catching is one thing, passing is quite another. In 9th position, you'll see exiting the chicane, the red Williams of Heinz Harold Fredson. Jorna Lacey is 10th, Johnny Herbert is 11th. Wurz and Trulli are 12th and 13th. Takagi in the Tyrrell is 14th. In comes Schumacher again, Ralf Schumacher.
Yeah, does. He's going to regret this strategy. I think he had a good enough car to stop it and stay up there in the main race, and really it's such a shame because I think they've made an error of judgment on Ralph, but the afternoon's not yet over, but he's got too much work to do, I think.
Well, Fisichella is going past now, and Fisichella was in 7th position. He's now up into 6th place. Up into 7th place goes Eddie Irvine. No, he doesn't, because Ralf Schumacher has stayed ahead of both of them. Just.
So that puts Ralph behind Michael Schumacher and behind Damon Hill. So as you can see, back in now in 6th place. So if he's going to regain where he was in 3rd, now between now and the end of the race, he's got to pass Michael Schumacher, Damon Hill and Jacques Villeneuve to re-establish himself in 3rd place, and that's a tall order.
Yep, I for one don't think it's going to happen, but here's Jacques Villeneuve doing his left front tire a little harm. He locks up, it won't have damaged it very much. Skipping over the curbs, you've got to attack the curbs very hard indeed here at Hockenheim to get the fastest possible line. And we're on lap 30 as you see the leaders, Häkkinen and Coulthard, lapping tail-enders, and we leave Hockenheim for a few moments. Lap 32, and you're watching the McLarens, and there's a bit of drama here because we're wondering whether David Coulthard managed to take on enough fuel in that 9.8 second stop of his as a result of overshooting his point to stop by a foot or so. The mechanics had to move. They had to carry the heavy wheels and tyres and the petrol hose, which weighs a heck of a lot, and reposition them, and it's quite conceivable that they didn't get enough fuel in which case David Coulthard will have to come in yet again. He stopped once on a one-stop strategy, and a two-stop strategy could mean that Villeneuve might move up into 2nd position, and conceivably even Damon Hill, who is currently 15 seconds behind Coulthard, could benefit as well. You're looking now at Olivier Panis, and the fuel filler flap is open. Doesn't really do a lot of harm, but it doesn't do any good, and it's not supposed to happen. And there's news from James Allen, who's with McLaren.
Yes, it's Mika Häkkinen, I think, who's got the problem, Murray, because his pit board is about to go out saying, I think it's going to say map 2. So they're obviously telling him to change the engine mapping there just to try and conserve fuel as much as possible. Meanwhile, Adrian Newey, Mario Ilian from Mercedes, toing and froing to the telemetry to see whether or not Häkkinen has enough fuel to make it through to the end of the race. At the moment, that's all I can tell you, but I think it's Häkkinen that's got the problem, not Coulthard.
That'll do, James. Great information from our technical man in the pits, James Allen, and we look at Ralf Schumacher, who's being caught by Fisichella, and behind him Eddie Irvine. Now the race order is Häkkinen, who may have a problem. David Coulthard's only 1 second behind him and pressing hard on lap 33 out of 45. Jacques Villeneuve is 3rd, 6 seconds behind Häkkinen, and 9 seconds, I'm sorry, ahead of Damon Hill. And Damon Hill and Schumacher, Michael, are both catching Jacques Villeneuve. Now we've got a race really building in the closing stages because we are now 3/4 of the way through the German Grand Prix, and Mario Ilian, that's the joint boss of Ilmor, he's the design brains who produces these magnificent engines. That's Norbert Haug, the German Mercedes-Benz boss, having a consultation with Mario Ilian in the pit lane. And it's not about what they're going to have for tea, I can tell you that.
No, it's obviously there is some kind of concern. That's not a normal conversation. They wouldn't wander around in the middle of the pit lane, of all places. There is clearly some concern. They've been studying the meter closely, and there is some concern they've got enough fuel in one of those two McLarens. As Eddie Irvine really homes in on the back of Giancarlo Fisichella. Remember, his pit stop just didn't work out at all well for him, and he slipped back down to 8th place. Damon Hill going well up there in 4th. Very strong run from him, one of his strongest of the year, I'd say.
Absolutely. Now let's look at the constructors' situation. McLaren's 1st and 2nd. The Williams of Villeneuve is 3rd. Both the Jordans are in the top 6 places. Damon Hill is 4th, and Schumacher Michael is 6th.
There you see them checking again the fuel meter on, and they may be loading a bit more fuel on board. Häkkinen still leading the race coming out of turn 1, but quite clearly they're having to recalibrate something.
Now I know James Allen can hear me. Maybe I wasn't listening properly James, I've missed the point if I wasn't, because it was Coulthard that I thought might have had a fuel load problem and Häkkinen that didn't, and yet it's Häkkinen that may be coming in. Can you come back and tell us what the situation is?
Board was shown to Mika Häkkinen saying map 2. David Coulthard's been getting a normal pit board. Ron Dennis is down here now, and he's just crossing the pit lane again. He's obviously deeply indignant about the whole thing, but at the moment it's a bit touch and go. I can't get from anybody at McLaren, partly because they won't let me in the garage, as we know they're the only team won't let us in there. Now Jürgen Schrempf, the boss of Mercedes, is getting involved as well. If they'd let me in, I could tell you viewers at home, but unfortunately they won't, so there we are. Anyway, Ron's smiling now, so maybe the fuel consumption is coming back to Mika Häkkinen, but tense times anyway.
Well, just to let you know that Ron Dennis, the team boss, was talking to Mika Häkkinen's engineer, which could well be a key.
Well, now Villeneuve is going for it. You saw the Williams go through as coming towards us. You see Damon Hill 4th and Michael Schumacher 5th. Ralf Schumacher is in 6th position, but Jacques Villeneuve has closed the gap to David Coulthard to just over 5 seconds, lapping marginally quicker. Whether he can catch him is yet to be seen. There's Damon Hill. And
Damon's going to have to work hard to defend that 4th place, because Michael Schumacher's on a charge, nibbling away about 0.3 of a second per lap from Damon Hill's 3.6 second lead over him. So Michael on a pretty good charge, and Damon encountering a few back markers in this section of the race.
And once again, quite obviously, Michael Schumacher making up for the deficiencies of the car. He's just signed a new contract of something like £20 million a year, plus all the money that he makes from promotional things, which will double it. But when you see how he can drive and how he's driving now, you have to say that he's worth every pfennig of it. Wake up, chaps. It's the McLaren mechanics having a little siesta there, watching the monitor and seeing Mika Häkkinen and David Coulthard 1 second apart on lap 45, so just about 10 laps to go now. Through the Ost curve, that's at the top of the Hockenheimring, which was originally built as a test track for Mercedes-Benz production cars. And the Mercedes-Benz Ilmor-built engine is certainly having a test. Now look at Villeneuve in the background. The gap is down to 4 seconds. Jacques has really pulled the bung out.
Yes, Villeneuve, as you say, just now 4 seconds behind Coulthard, 5 seconds behind race leader Mika Häkkinen. If Häkkinen has got some kind of problem, Coulthard's going to have to bolt. He's going to have to go, because Mercedes-Benz will want to win this race on their home turf. So Jacques Villeneuve is going to play a key role, I think, in McLaren's strategy if either of their two cars do have some kind of fueling problem.
Jacques Villeneuve has just signed for the new BAR team, which is starting next year. And he said one of the things that decided him to do so was the fact that he doesn't want another season like this one. He's had a bad time with Williams. The car isn't as good as last year's one, but they've made a lot of changes to it, and it's working.
3.1 seconds now. Villeneuve sniffs. He's got a chance here. Just 3.1 seconds behind. Coulthard struggling in that last part of the lap. Otherwise, I think he would be all over the back of Mika Häkkinen all the time. He lost another 0.6 on the last lap, but meanwhile, the guy who's got no problems, he can see those two McLarens ahead of him, look.
Yeah, and look how much closer they're getting. Down from 220 miles an hour to 70 miles an hour, now accelerating up again.
And he's already made 0.4 of a second in the first quarter of the lap.
So, a drought of wins for world champion Jacques Villeneuve since the Luxembourg Grand Prix last year, and he's visibly gaining now, never mind the stopwatch.
Yeah, that 4.2 you just saw on the screen is wrong. He's not 4.2 seconds, he's 3.1 seconds behind David Coulthard.
And Mika Häkkinen and Coulthard are coming up on tail-enders. This is going to be another boon for Jacques Villeneuve. The tail-ender that he's coming up to, I think, is Mika Salo. It looked like one of the black arrows to me. So there is Häkkinen leading. Coulthard second. As we pan round and go into the motordrome, look for the car ahead of them. It may delay them if he doesn't spot them in his mirrors and move over. And all the time, Jacques Villeneuve, reveling in this opportunity to be driving a really competitive car, is reeling in the two McLarens in front of him, visibly closing the gap as they come through to complete their 34 fifth lap and go into lap 36 out of 45. There is Villeneuve, and the gap now is 2.1 seconds. It's come down from 6 seconds to 2.1 seconds. Johnny Herbert going off, and through goes Alexander Wurz. Again, Johnny Herbert won't be penalised, I think, unless he scrambles out in front of Alexander Wurz. But now we're looking at a slow motion of Mika Häkkinen and David Coulthard riding in his wheel tracks. Where is the Williams? Well, we're too close to the McLaren to see in that close-up shot. We're on lap 37 now. And 3.1 seconds covers the first three. And Jack Villeneuve's last lap, 1 minute 46.4, was 1 second faster than Mika Häkkinen. They're worried men in the McLaren area on the pit lane. Up to the OS curve. Now, is it Salo ahead of them, or is it Shinji Nakano? I'm sure it's Mika Salo. It is Mika Salo, there he is. Now, Mika is an experienced driver, the Finnish driver in the Arrows. He's driven in 62 Grand Prix. He'll be watching his mirrors, but Jack Villeneuve won't be watching his mirrors. He's watching that fast-moving dot in front of him, and the fast-moving dot is David Coulthard. And just in front of David Coulthard, as he goes into the motordrome again, is Mika Häkkinen. And Häkkinen is getting closer to Salo. You saw Salo. There are the two McLarens. This is great stuff.
Well, we could be looking at the first Williams win of the year, because quite clearly the McLarens are not able to push as hard as they'd want for whatever reason. And there's Eddie Irvine still trying to get past the Fisichella in the Benetton. So Irvine working hard. He just doesn't seem to have quite enough straight line speed. He looks close enough there. I think the camera angle deceived, and he's locked his brakes badly up the inside, and that certainly won't get him through.
Well, Eddie Irvine's got the taste of finishing in the points, finishing third or finishing fourth. At the present moment, he is in 8th position, and Fisichella, who drove so well in Austria to take pole position, is staving him off. As into the pit lane goes the Prost, and over the line go the Benetton and the Ferrari. Now, is Eddie Irvine going to have another go for that 7th place as they come up into the north curve? Fisichella runs wide onto the curbs. Eddie Irvine does the same thing. And now the gap between Villeneuve, who is third, and Häkkinen, who is first, is still just 3 seconds. And that is Olivier Panis. Remember, he had a problem earlier on and had to come in and take a penalty. Time for us to leave Hockenheim. Join us back soon. Oh! Just 6 laps to go at Hockenheim, and Jacques Villeneuve has been delayed by traffic in his marvellous battle for 2nd or even 1st position. Here is Mika Häkkinen coming towards us. This is a replay. You see Jacques Villeneuve on the right in the red Williams being just edging past Mika Salo. He's still got Tora Takagi. Here's another replay of him passing Tora Takagi, and the red and yellow oil flag is out.
Yes, that could be anything from oil to gravel to bits of grass on the racetrack, or a car that's blown up and deposited something, even water. So that's why they're hanging that one out. Doesn't necessarily mean just oil, but the two McLarens had a better run through that traffic. Villeneuve still has a back marker ahead of him, and the Williams crew are out in the pit lane. So we'll be interested to see what that's all about, because we think we saw JV on the tyres out there, but it'd be surprising if they're bringing him in for a pit stop.
Well, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, his teammate, is down in 9th position. See no real reason to bring him in. Well, we've just got a message that we think Jacques Villeneuve in 3rd position that we're riding with now is going to be brought in. I'm looking at his tyre, as I'm sure you are. It looks all right to me, but I'm not driving the car. He is. They know what the situation is. Meantime, up at the front, Martin, we've all seen teams driving around in team order before. The governing body have confirmed only this week, as past goes Villeneuve, past Takagi. The governing body have confirmed only this week that team orders are all right, provided it's a fight for the World Championship. Do you think that's what's happening at the front between the two McLarens?
I think it could be. I mean, clearly Häkkinen has a 30-point lead in the World Championship. Michael Schumacher's having an off day, to say the least. I didn't see any sign of Villeneuve coming in. No, he's down the pit straight. The boys have gone back in again. I don't know if that was some kind of ploy to make McLaren back off, but you know, they could well be using Coulthard to be a buffer against the charge of Villeneuve, and clearly with such a big championship lead, Häkkinen has the best opportunity to take that World Championship, and they want to make the most points they can with the Ferraris having a very off day.
And on lap 41 out of 45, again, as they were in Austria, the two McLarens are in a maximum Constructors' Championship points situation. 10 points for Mika Häkkinen, 6 points for David Coulthard, 16 points altogether, and Michael Schumacher is the only Ferrari in the points. He is in 5th position, so there's a 14-point gap between the McLaren and the Ferrari teams at the present moment. They would end up 24 points ahead of Ferrari, with the Hungarian, Belgium, Italian, Luxembourg and Japanese Grand Prix to come. But I think James Allen has got some news for us.
Yeah, it's just been down to Williams to see what that was all about. Villeneuve radioed in, there was something wrong at the back end of the car. He thought it might have been the differential that was going, or possibly the tyres. They had a good old look at it, good old think about it on the telemetry, and in fact, the drama was okay, but I'm not sure whether he's going to be able to push quite as hard as he has been to the date.
Well, I can tell you that Michael Schumacher that you're looking at is trying very hard indeed for that extra point for 4th position. He's on 2 points at the present moment for 5th place. Damon Hill in front of him, there he is in the yellow Jordan, is 4th, and Schumacher wants that place.
That's Ralph, and this is the Fisichella Irvine. Just as we went to a break, you may have seen Irvine flying off the road. He got back on quite easily, just took a little trip down the grass, and he's clearly he's faster than Fisichella. He's immediately, Fisichella running wide, it won't leave enough space for Eddie, but he's clearly faster than Fisichella, just can't find a way round him for that 7th place.
This race has gone incredibly quickly. We're in lap 42 out of 45 at the present moment. Just 3 more to go at the end of it, with the two McLarens looking in an absolutely impregnable position. They're 6 points ahead of Jacques Villeneuve. Here is the battle between Fisichella 7th and Eddie Irvine 8th, in an attempt to get into the points, but in order to do that they would have to catch and pass 6th place Ralf Schumacher, who is well up the road from them.
Yes, and Häkkinen and Coulthard have stabilised at a 1 second gap, and Villeneuve, as James suggested he might, is backing off slightly. The gap now up to 5 seconds. There's a slow-mo of Häkkinen. I don't believe he had any particular problems, just showing you how hard the car's working. But well, Delboy and Rodney would be pleased with that three-wheeler, wouldn't they, coming through there? But Villeneuve clear, and the fastest man on the track at the moment is Michael Schumacher, who's pursuing the next fastest man on the track, Damon Hill. We haven't seen much of Damon. There he is trying to get past the back marker. Damon has driven a very, very good race.
He has indeed, and if Damon finishes where he is now, or any place above it, this will be his first points for 1998. A quite incredible situation, and this is the 11th race out of 16, and Damon Hill, the reigning world champion, has yet to score a world championship point. His teammate Ralf Schumacher scored 2 points in Austria, and he scored a point also at the British Grand Prix for 6th position, but Damon has a big 0 at the present moment. Let's hope that it doesn't stay that way for much longer.
Yes, unfortunately he's not the reigning world champion, because Villeneuve is, Damon the 96 champion, but he cleared that traffic much better, and Michael's now got it all to do. And of course that will be Damon's first ever points for Jordan too.
Absolutely, and you can see Schumacher going through and taking Mika Salo. But all the time, this is helping Damon Hill in 4th position. We're at lap 43 now out of 45. Häkkinen and Coulthard absolutely together. Eddie Irvine running wide at the Ost curve, as several people before him have done. Fisichella increases his gap in 7th place. Behind Coulthard is Jacques Villeneuve, 5 seconds. Damon Hill is 4th. Michael Schumacher's 5th. Ralf Schumacher, both the Schumachers in the points. And this would be Jordan's 4th points in succession if they both finish. There's Damon, and you can see how close Michael Schumacher is. He's got to get past Tora Takagi in the Tyrrell, but I think even Michael Schumacher is going to have a job to catch and pass Damon Hill. Yes, the world champion of 1996, my apologies. Who will ever forget that fabulous race in Japan where he clinched the championship from Jacques Villeneuve. And Tora Takagi is certainly not making it easy for Schumacher, who got very angry with Diniz at this point yesterday.
Yes, that about summed it up, didn't it? Michael got out of shape in the third chicane, couldn't get anywhere near the Tyrrell coming down to the stadium, and had to do a desperate outbraking into the Sachs curve. He really struggled to get past that Tyrrell. The car is not underneath him. Look at him, he's going to lose that if he's not careful. Unbelievable. Michael really fighting that Ferrari.
And as he goes across the line in 5th position, the gap between himself and Damon Hill in 4th place, on target for his first points of the year, is over 4 seconds. The two McLarens tied together by an invisible cord. Now on lap 44, they've only got this lap and the next lap. There's about 6 miles then to go. Here's a replay.
Look at Michael just working away at the wheel, just feeling the grip in the seat and just holding on to that, just finding enough lateral grip to keep the car pointing in the right direction, and the McLaren's almost appearing to be in formation now.
Well, I think David Coulthard has virtually conceded the Drivers' Championship to Mika Häkkinen. And this race, if the McLarens finish first and second where they are now, with Michael Schumacher only scoring 2 World Championship points for Ferrari and Eddie Irvine scoring none, is going to mean that the Constructors' Championship is going to be very, very difficult. Not impossible, but very, very difficult for Ferrari to win. They've tried so hard, they got very close to it last year. Remember the dramatic race we had at the end of the season at Jerez, and it looks at the moment as though it's a very strong championship contender in Mika Häkkinen and an even stronger championship contender for the Constructors' contest from McLaren. We're on lap 44. That is Heinz-Harald Frentzen. He's getting pretty close to Eddie Irvine. There's all sorts of possible changes, but now the two McLarens go into the 45th and last lap of the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim. Norbert Haug, and next to him is Jürgen Schremp, who is the head man of Mercedes-Benz, the man who signs the mega checks for the engines. And Jacques Villeneuve is going to dodge out from behind the slipstream of Olivier Panis, and Villeneuve is 4 seconds behind the race leader. But it's a good recovery for Williams. It's going to be a brilliant 1-2 for McLaren, for Mercedes-Benz, who provided the power. Germany is going to be absolutely delighted. They might have preferred Michael Schumacher as their hero to win for Ferrari, but at least it looks as though he's going to be in the points, 5th.
Well, Villeneuve's not going to let these two cruise the last lap very much. Look at him pushing like crazy. The two McLarens there, just 2.9 seconds over the start-finish line was Jacques Villeneuve behind. I think he's much closer now, and really they can't give him too much of a chance. They've got to keep pushing. There's one back marker ahead. He may not come into play before the end of the lap, but Villeneuve going to keep those guys looking in their mirrors right until the checkered flag.
Yeah, the Häkkinen and Coulthard will have had a radio message, of course, to tell them to be careful about Villeneuve coming up behind them. They enter the Motordrome for the 45th and virtually certain victorious time round the Sachs curve, up to the Opel curve, the right-hander, which is turn 14 out of 15. Mika Häkkinen is coming through to win his 6th win of 1998, the 7th of his career. Häkkinen wins in Germany. Coulthard is 2nd in Germany. McLaren Mercedes are 1st and 2nd, and Williams are now back in contention. A superb 3rd for Jacques Villeneuve, only 2.1 seconds behind the winner. Damon Hill gets his first World Championship points of the year, 4th place. Michael Schumacher finishes 2nd, 2 points for Ferrari. There he is, acknowledging the cheers of the crowd. And his brother, Ralf Schumacher, unless he has terrible luck in the closing yards of the German Grand Prix, is going to finish 6th, and that's the first time, of course, that Jordan will have had both their drivers in the points this year. A very satisfactory race for McLaren, and for Jordan and for Williams, but not, sadly, from their point of view, for Ferrari. 1:48.629.